Welcome to Clean Air Action's award-winning podcast, Cleaning Up Dirty. We talk politics with non-toxic people. I'm Liz Green-Schultz. I'm Political Director of Clean Air Action.
And I'm Sean Hoffman, Legislative Director. Liz and I run Clean Air Action, which is the proud sister organization of the Clean Air Council, the oldest environmental and public health organization in Pennsylvania.
Together, we fight for your constitutional right to breathe healthy air. Over here at Clean Air Action, we fight dirty with clean. That applies to anyone who messes with our political and civil rights, including corporations and politicians.
What do you say there, Liz? And we're back.
And we're back. And today we're going to talk about politics, as we like to do.
For a change.
For a change?
Yeah. Recent election happened. 2025 elections are in the book. What do we think?
Was there a blue wave? Did we blue wave?
Was there a wave? Was it a wave election? Everybody wants to know if it's a wave.
And everybody wants to know what our snacks are going to be for this episode. It's what all the listeners are
tuning in for.
Yeah.
Before we get to the nitty gritty, what are we looking at snack wise?
We like the snacks to keep it fun and interesting, and I'm excited about these snacks.
And to keep me in suspense.
On your toes.
Dread. Some form of dread as to what crazy thing will come out of this bag.
You know, it's funny you should say that.
Oh, no.
I'm going to say I kept it relatively mild, but
okay.
I did consider the alternative. So thing one is peach rings.
Peach rings. Okay, that's a throwback. Right?
And I thought it would be good for a nonpartisan election podcast episode, some sort of full circle analogy.
Sure. And only 99 cents? My God, what can you get for 99 cents nowadays?
I know.
Huh?
I actually meant to check if they actually charged me 99 cents, and I did not. So
are those like old ones that they had on the shelf for a while that are just like, you know what, well, we sell them for more now, but we can't change the bags.
Well, they were at a corner store. So I was like, I have no idea what their stock turnover is, but they're squishy.
What's the brand? It's Raylicious.
Raylicious, better than delicious.
You know it. I myself am not familiar with Raylicious's offerings.
Well, you could check out their Instagram according to the bag. But it seems they're a Philly-based company made for Ray's snacks. Yeah.
Huh. Check out Raylicious, guys.
Yeah. And I was
Philly's own.
I was between these peach rings and tagine peach rings, and I went for these because I don't know if you've ever tried tagine sweet snacks, but for me, it's been quite a mixed bag, which for me really says something.
No pun intended. What is the difference between the tagine rings and the standard?
Quite a bit. I did think about bringing both, but I didn't want to go overboard with today's episode. But it's the tagine is like a maybe spicy. It's definitely a savory flavor. So
sounds like it's a candy. Sounds like a candy that's doing things that candies shouldn't be doing.
Exactly, and which I love, and that's part of why I thought about bringing the tagine gummy peach rings, but I went straight with
opted with the regular
Raylicious
gummy.
You want to give it a go?
Sure, give it a go. I mean, as far as things you've had me try on the show, this is
I figured it
pretty
was
mild.
Yeah, fairly mild. Bobby, you want a peach ring? You ever had the tagine snacks, Bobby?
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's a really classic spice mix with sugar and stuff in it.
Okay.
They're not everybody's cup of tea, I can tell you, because I brought them on a bachelorette party recently, and nobody liked them.
I'm in good company then. The peach rings are lovely. Raylicious, delicious.
Indeed.
Better than delicious.
Better, even. They've got like a nice meatiness to them. Not flavor-wise, they're like, you get a lot of good peach bite in there. You know?
You really do. And I'll confess, I bought these yesterday for myself to eat alone last night, and then remembered we were taping the podcast and figured I better save them.
And now Bobby and I are the beneficiaries.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Very honored.
Yeah, I love that we're keeping it local, keeping it Philly. I can't believe I wasn't familiar. I know about the peanut chews. You know, that's a Philly tradition, but...
Well, welcome to the Raylicious party.
Baby. Yes.
And our other snack of the day.
Uh-oh. Ba-na-na-na.
Smidgens.
Hey,
little throwback. The Gertrude Hawk. I
love me a smidge, dude.
Both the dark chocolate raspberry.
There's a lot of things coming out of this bag, guys. I honestly thought we were done with the Raylicious peach rings.
And
but there's more.
The milk chocolate peanut butter smidgens, which are my fave. And they're
a classic combo.
They're the jack-o'-lantern ones. We're a smidge past Halloween, so it's perfect.
Yeah, we got to get rid of those, man. We got to eat them up.
Do you want a smidgen or you want to save
I'll
it?
take the raspberry smidge, please. Smidgeon.
Bobby, you want a
Yeah, hit
smidge?
me with that peanut butter.
Hit me with the peanut butter on it.
Oh, there's like a secondary.
These take me back to high school. There was a Gertrude Hawk in the mall near me, and I used to hit that up.
That was the move. I used to, Neshaminy Mall, Oxford Valley Mall, had Gertrude Hawks. I can remember, still in my brain, if you put me in either one of those malls, I could tell you where the Gertrude Hawks were.
Wow.
I don't think they're there anymore, though. Sad.
Delicious.
Holds up.
Oh, yeah.
These are pretty non-controversial snacks, I should say.
I know, so boring as far as my snack game goes.
I'm loving it. I think this is excellent.
Well, with that, are we ready
Down to business, yeah.
to get
What do
down to
we,
business here? So, did we have a blue wave? What do you think there, Mr. Hoffman?
Well, I think it depends on where you're sitting from. If you're down in Virginia, you might think, man, it was a wave. If you're somewhere else, you might not. It's an interesting...
I'm loving you trying to get through this while you're
I know
working your way through the smidgen.
The smidgen took a smidge to get through. It was yummy though. Oftentimes in elections, when you get a significant victory, you know, like in 2024, people are like, "Was that a red wave?" And throughout the course of this episode, we'll get into the details here and talk about whether or not we think it was or wasn't and why, because I think. It does. It depends on your perspective and kind of what you define as a wave. How about you? What do you think?
Well, and when you said people were like, was there a red wave? I thought, well, the Reds thought there was for sure. I mean, it was definitely framed as a red wave in 2024. And this election cycle, I have definitely seen framed as a blue wave. I'm a little more cautious with committing to it was a blue wave. I think that it was certainly bluer than I expected kind of across the board. So I understand why people are saying blue wave, but I'm not diving all the way into the blue wave water. We'll see what 2026 brings.
And that's a fair position to take. And I think you're right. I think most commentators were expecting Democrats to do well. That's sort of the conventional political wisdom. Whichever party is currently in the White House tends to do worse in the elections following when they get into the White House. It's which I think is an unfortunately perverse thing that happens.
That's a fun take.
It's like,
that's the opposite of my take.
The only time we get off the couch to go and really vote to make change is when we're pissed off that bad things are happening. They're like, I really hate that guy. I'm going to go vote. Like, it just seems that, like, man, couldn't we get into a more of a positive thing? Like, I am so passionate about the good things happening in the world and in the country and in the community that, like, I cannot wait to go and vote for these people. But hey, maybe
that's very sweet.
It is just a symptom of politics in the modern era, and maybe honestly for the better part of the last century, that has simply been the conventional wisdom that, like, okay, this person just got elected president, and then by this time next year, they're probably going to be getting whooped in the next, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it should work that way.
I love this take because, per usual, I have the opposite take. I think that...
Per usual. Bring it on.
I find it oddly optimistic, and it certainly doesn't surprise me that those are the trends, because I think people generally kind of like to go with the flow. We're pack animals, insert anthropological commentary on all of that. Mm-hmm. And so people will stand up and speak out when there's something going on that they don't like. And I love that. I like people power just juices me up. I wore my Dissent is Patriotic shirt today because I perceived this election cycle to be a show of dissent, a standing of, I don't like what I'm hearing in the news, and I'm going to show that I am not acquiescing to this. Of course, I'm not speaking about myself. This is what I saw in the voters. And I love that. I find it extremely hopeful. It gives me comfort as an American in a year where people, I think pretty much across the board, are pretty freaked out. All year I've been having conversations with people who think our democracy is in decline, our country is falling apart, are we headed for revolution and civil war? These are things I hear at cocktail parties.
Sure.
And that freaks me out more than the headlines, and the headlines are scary enough. And so I felt really comforted by the election results, not because of the particular candidates who won, but because of the pendulum swing back and forth. And to me, that is American democracy at its finest.
It's definitely democracy at work, and that...
I'm going to have a peach ring to celebrate.
Go for it. Get in there. It's certainly democracy at work, but I think we're talking about two separate things here. You know, isn't every election like people making their voices heard? I mean, one way or another, like every cycle. And if you like the results, then that's great. And if you dislike the results, then maybe it's less great. Whereas I'm sort of talking about, we have such a polarized society where the guy you didn't vote for gets in there and you're like unhappy for the next 4 years. There's gotta be a way for us as a nation, as a species, to try and get to a place where, and we could have many an episode about how this would happen, but to get to a place where it's like, okay, we've elected a person, and maybe it wasn't even the person I voted for, but I'm not so dead set. Like, I'm not counting the days until the next election so I can vote against these guys so hard. You know, I would love to see us as a nation get back to a place, if we ever were there, maybe like when FDR was president or something, where it was like, okay, you got a critical mass of people from sea to shining sea who are like, okay, like, let's see what happens here. Let's see. We seem to be generally moving in a decent direction. Good stuff's happening. Anyway.
I am so with you, and I would love to see America get back to that place. I don't think this year or the next years are going to be that time.
Of course,
but maybe
not.
After that.
Well, and I think this election perhaps indicates movement towards that direction. And we can, to your point, I think a lot of people are responding to some of the uncertainty, and I'll use the word chaos, sort of emanating from DC and from Harrisburg, honestly. You know, we don't have a budget in Harrisburg, and we don't have a budget in D.C. They might be working the latter out.
And the former, I think, but we're not there yet, and that's really being felt by wide swaths of government employees, and that is creating a lot of chaos. Everybody I know who is supposed to fly soon or recently has had disruptions.
Oh, yeah.
So people are really feeling the effects of government in their lives because of politicians stirring up chaos. And I oddly find that a good thing because I love the empowerment and engagement that inspires.
Sure. Folks are hungry for equilibrium. They're not looking for radical this, radical that from the left or the right. They want stability. They want to be able to afford stuff like food and rent. And I think that's a big reason why Democrats were so successful in this election, because they honed in on those particular concerns. And I think across the spectrum, you got a Democratic socialist in Mamdani getting elected in New York City. And then you got some relative moderates in Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey and Abigail Spanberger from Virginia. And it's because they spoke to what the people wanted to hear. Yeah, the people in New York are a lot more progressive than the people down in Virginia.
But even still, it was unclear if Mamdani was going to win, right? So
right. But again, I think
it's a big historic election.
So many commentators are like, oh my God, he's a socialist. He's so far lefty. And there have been some Republican commentators who have said this very thing of like, he's just effective. Forget about the label that's attached to him. People are moving for this guy because he is speaking to their needs and their wants in a way that gets through to them. I think Spanberger did the same thing in Virginia. The Mamdani message and approach might not have worked in Virginia, but what they said to connect with voters, I think, emulated the same approach. And that's what people want from Republicans. That's what people want from Democrats. That's what people want from independents across the board. And I think that's why Trump got in there in the first place. I think people thought Biden might have been a return to normalcy. Unfortunately, I don't think they believed he was a strong president. I think, honestly, the age thing really, really weakened him across the board.
And erased the good work that occurred while he was in office.
Definitely. I think people were like, you know what? I don't feel secure.
Yep.
I don't feel secure. Yeah, maybe you're working on some good stuff. I'm not feeling it at home enough, and I don't feel secure with you. So they're like, okay, let's try Trump. And now a year later,
now deep into security, of course.
Well, and again, I mean, the pendulum has swung. Now it's like, okay, well, we tried something different. That doesn't appear to be working either, at least not yet. Who knows? Maybe this tariff gamble will pay off big time. But so far, it's caused a lot of disruption.
Yeah, and we keep workshopping what we want for the country and what's working and what isn't and what's speaking to the voters and what isn't. And while you were talking about Mamdani, I was thinking about the AOC Trump voters.
Oh, yeah.
Who,
I love talking about this.
I know, it's so interesting. The commentary I'm seeing about this cycle is a lot about the economy and people's insecurity with if they're going to be able to pay their bills. And AOC definitely has spoken to that. Mamdani has definitely spoken to that. So I love seeing that this matters to the voters.
Yeah. And just because we're on the topic, I'll say that you want to be a big tent, whether this is Republicans or Democrats, you got to have a spectrum. You've got the folks on the left, you've got the folks in the middle, or for the Republicans, you got the folks on the right, you got the folks in the middle. That's historically how it has been and how it should be, because then you get a diverse perspective. And so for Democrats who are keeping Mamdani at arm's length, I would say, man, I think you need to think twice about that, because remember what happened to Republicans who try to keep Trump at arm's length? Yeah, they're all gone. They're gone. They're all gone, man. And with
Which
with
I don't know that Mamdani
exceptions.
would have the same approach to all of that Trump has, but
Well, no, and that's not where I'm going with that so much. More of like there were so many people who thought this guy is radioactive because he is so not a politician. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He's a joke. He says crazy stuff. He's got a terrible record, this and that. And look at where he is. 2-term president of the United States. So, when I read
a lot of commentators would have got that wrong.
Did.
Yeah.
Myself included. And, I think for folks who are like, oh, no, Mamdani this, Mamdani that, Republicans are like licking their chops to try and tie Democrats to Mamdani. And I'm like, well, this guy just did the impossible. He's now, what is he, 33, 34 years old, mayor of America's most populous city. It's got a higher population than a number of states. I mean, it's a big friggin' deal. And so for Democrats to be like, oh no, this guy, I think he's bad news. He didn't just like fall into that office by accident.
Yeah.
There's something there.
And I can't imagine he would have won, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Oh, no. Agreed. No, I think
less than that.
We are once again in New York City seeing it as a microcosm of the nation, where New York has been like, you know what? We tried this guy, we tried that guy, we tried the other one, the sort of like standard players, and we're dissatisfied. So you know what? Let's go with a radical new choice. And they chose Mamdani. And so, again, I think the parallels between him and Trump, they have basically nothing in common as far as their political philosophies go. But I think as far as being disruptors, I mean, they're one and the same.
Yep.
And so, again, for Democrats to viscerally put up barriers to sort of like protect themselves from Mamdani, I think that is foolish. Now, I'm not saying you have to jump in head first. The guy, let's see what he does as far as governance goes. But, he's got a lot of critics to prove wrong. But to be so afraid that, Republicans are going to kill us with this, it's like, well, yeah, we thought Democrats were going to kill Republicans with Trump, too. and lo and behold,
Here
we are.
So while you were talking, I was thinking a little bit about Danny Seisler, because he is 33. And he just took a seat that I did not think he was going to take. I am familiar with Danny.
Bucks County Sheriff.
Yep, Bucks County Sheriff.
Bucks County, just outside of Philadelphia, my home county, where I grew up, born and raised. Bucks.
Yep, and I've never lived in Bucks, but I worked in Bucks, so I'm quite familiar with that race and the individuals associated with that race and the Bucks County prosecutor's race, which Joe Kahn won. And I was frankly shocked by both outcomes, even though I know both of them. They're stellar candidates. We endorsed Joe Kahn because he had some environmental issues in his race. And I quite honestly underestimated the voters of Bucks County, because those are races that tend to stay with the incumbent. And Danny and Joe were challengers who ran novel campaigns that I was on the edge of my seat to see what happened. And when I got a text message around midnight of a video of Danny's acceptance speech, I was like, what? He won? So that's a race that's worth noticing. It is historic. I think it's gotten some national attention because it was a really unexpected outcome.
Rightfully so. And we said it on this show before, and we'll say it again. The Philadelphia collar counties are known as bellwethers. Oftentimes, the suburbs in general across the nation tend to be more of the swingy locations as far as voters go in America in this era, and particularly in Pennsylvania.
In fact, we have a podcast episode called Is Bucks County America's Swing County?
That's right. And you check out our very first episode ever where we interviewed Joe Kahn back when he was running for Attorney General. And then the second episode features Danny.
Mm-hmm. But, and the Is Bucks America's Swing County is a different episode. So obviously Sean and I have become quite familiar with this area of politics, and yet still I was surprised.
Indeed. So in southeastern Pennsylvania in general, I would say there's a number of counties there that can be considered bellwethers for statewide results, for presidential results. Bucks County is arguably the most 50-50 of the lot in that sort of zone. Went for Trump in 2024 by a very, very slim margin, but did go for Trump nonetheless. And historically, growing up in Bucks County, Republicans really dominated at the local level. And the type of Republicans, they were generally moderate, mild-mannered kind of folks, reasonable, get stuff done, keep taxes relatively low, basically don't bother people otherwise. That tradition, I think, has been challenged a lot during the Trump era, where you have coming from the MAGA folks, where you have coming from Trump, the leader of the Republican Party, this aggressive tactic, this aggressive stance to try and really push the envelope, particularly on social issues. Mm-hmm. We saw a number of school districts in Bucks County over the past few years, pivot towards these book banning incidents and a lot of these culture war things.
Moms for Liberty.
Taking
over the school boards, and then the challengers taking them back. And there've been these really interesting tides.
Yeah, they got booted out. If anything, the tide has moved the complete different direction. And these are in school districts in Bucks that had historically been mostly dominated by Republicans. Mm-hmm. So there certainly seems to be a shift afoot in Bucks. And, we could bandy about theories as to why, as far as shifting populations and what have you. But for this, I think it continues a trend that we've seen in Bucks for several years, with Democrats being successful with these local elections. But I think the real explanation here, it's got to be enthusiasm. Like, Democratic enthusiasm has got to be off the charts right now.
It is, in Bucks County in particular.
Oh, and because you wouldn't see those margins if it wasn't.
Yeah, Danny and Joe both won by more than 20,000 votes, which is pretty significant.
Extraordinary. Yeah, it's a big margin. So you're seeing...
And these are seats not normally held by Dems.
Well, historically, none of these offices were held by Dems. Joe Kahn's the first district attorney since the
Civil 1800s?
Civil War.
Yeah. And to be a Dem prosecutor of Bucks County. And similarly, Danny is, Democrats have not held the office of sheriff much. There was a Democrat who held the seat for just one term a few years back, and then was defeated by Danny's opponent. Now Danny's in there, but it is not an office that has been held by Dems very often historically in Bucks County. And so perhaps this represents a shifting towards the center of gravity when it comes to which party is perceived as the most reasonable. Mm-hmm. It's no secret that the Democratic Party's brand is really, really poor right now, mostly from a perception of weakness and a lack of a leader to sort of coalesce around and even to evaluate, is this person strong and effective or not? The Democrats don't have that person yet. Well, and in Danny's race, I'm not a specific analyst in this respect, but it's pretty clear that it was a rejection of the voters of a MAGA agenda. because Danny's campaign really zeroed in on the use of the Bucks County Sheriff's Office to advance a federal agenda in the immigration policy. And Danny said that's not what this office is supposed to be used for. And clearly the voters agreed.
Right. Again, it's a pivot back towards what's reasonable. Is it the job of the sheriff to engage in these sorts of controversial things? Or are we looking for more bread and butter kind of things for a sheriff to do? And I think that message resonated. You combine that with enthused Democrats, Republicans who are unenthused to go out, and then they just ran a good campaign. They raised a lot of money. Candidate quality matters. Forever and always, every single race in every single election cycle, full stop. What does that mean? You got to get good people. People who are decent folks, who are smart, who are effective, who can connect with people.
And that's these two. They're thoughtful attorneys who have a really proven track record of public service and reasonableness.
Right. And this is, again,
they are not liberal, leftist, Zoran Mamdanis.
Right. No, and they're a good fit for Bucks. And I think that showed here. But there's no way they would have seen the margins that they saw if we didn't have really high Democratic enthusiasm and some Republican depression as far as turnout goes.
And maybe also sadness.
And maybe also
some tears about the lawsuits.
And this is something else to note, and I think it applies across the board for this election here. A lot of times for Republicans in this era, winning elections or not losing as badly as they would otherwise is often dependent on running up really high margins in rural places. It's like, all right, well, we as Republicans might get whooped in the cities, and then, maybe we kind of split in the suburbs, or maybe we even lose ground now in the suburbs, whereas we used to have a lot of it. But we're gonna kill it so hard in the rural places that'll offset those other spots and maybe even overcome that. In this election, we really saw farmers and folks in rural places, and that turnout was simply not there. Is that because of the tariffs? Is that because Trump is proposing to bail out Argentina and buy their beef? Even after Argentina made a deal with China to sell soybeans and undercut American farmers. I think there's a lot of farmers who are saying, that ain't cool, man. I'm not feeling that. This does not seem like this is good for us. And so you got to
Plus, it's a really uncertain economy. Yeah. Not a good time to have shutdowns across the board, right. State and federal. And I've seen the state and federal shutdowns get blamed on Republicans. Of course, Republicans are going to point the finger elsewhere. But all in all, I would say this election's results kind of made sense.
Indeed. And I'm not saying that the farmers turned around and voted for Democrats, but they might have just chosen to stay home. And again, if you're not running up, if you're Republicans and you're not running that score up big in these rural places, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw here.
And another race with real high margins for the Dems was the Pennsylvania judiciary. The Supreme Court seats, there were 3 of them up for retention. And the results of that race were projected to be unclear because another unprecedented campaign, this by an outsider, not by opponents or challengers, but there's a well-known billionaire who injected a lot of money into the Pennsylvania Supreme Court races in hopes of unseating 3 Democrat justices so that those seats would be freed up for Republicans to run. And that attempt was unsuccessful. They held their seats.
Don't you mean Democratic justices?
Sure. What did I say?
Democrat judges?
Democrat judges.
This is it's a pet peeve of mine. Republicans love to say those Democrat issues. It's Democratic issues.
Democratic. I do have a lot of Republicans in my orbit, so maybe I've picked up some of their lingo.
I mean, I think it's starting to spread. I think it's just going to become the nomenclature, but it's one of those things that Republicans do to drive Democrats insane, successfully probably. But the Pennsylvania judicial races are really interesting because they certainly fit. Obviously, the 3 justices who were up for retention were successfully retained, but the retention process itself is so weird. I don't know if it's unique to Pennsylvania, but I don't know if there's too many other states that do it this way, where Pennsylvania, you run initially when there's an opening for a judge on the Supreme Court, appellate courts, trial level courts, you run as a partisan person for a 10-year term. So you run as a Democrat for judge, or you run as a Republican for judge, and then you win, and then you get a 10-year term. And then at the end of the 10-year term...
All of that is fairly unusual. The idea that Pennsylvania elects all of our judges, or most of our judges.
Under partisan labels, for sure.
That's uncommon.
There are, I think, states that elect the judges, but they don't have D or R next to their names. After your 10-year term is up, assuming you haven't hit the mandatory retirement age, then you're up for what's called a retention vote, where on the ballot, all the voters see is, do you want to retain Judge Joe Blow, yes or no? And I believe that there is only one person who has failed a retention vote.
I think that's right.
Maybe ever.
In Pennsylvania.
And that's thousands of judges over the ages who have come and gone.
So this was an attempt to shift that in politics and make it so that it's not a given that judges just get retained, and everybody sort of sat on the edges of their seats to see, is it going to work? I started hearing about this race last year. People started to get nervous last year about this year's retention race.
And it's a big deal because, as we know, state Supreme Courts are really important as far as deciding any number of influential laws, including whether or not districts are gerrymandered in a certain way at the state level. But I know it was
environmental protections.
And environmental protections.
Shout out to environmental protections.
That's right. I myself, I was not worried about the judicial retention, or I should say, I did not think there would be an upset there. There was a lot of money spent on the race, no doubt about it. But the nature of the retention, it really insulates. I mean, it is, again, what other stats do you need other than there's only been a single person not retained? And you know, there's been some over all the years, I'm sure there was some real duds in there as far as folks who were like, this guy probably really should be retained. But it's just this inherently confusing process that most people get into the voting booth and they're like, I don't know who the hell this is. Like, yeah, all right, it's a judge doing.
And like, what is the Supreme Court justice? Pennsylvania has its own compared to, a lot of people don't even realize that.
And whether it's a Supreme Court justice or not, maybe it's the appellate level, maybe it's the trial level. I mean, we went in and voted this last time. What was there? 30 people on that, 30 judges up for retention on that thing. Most of them, nobody has any clue. And that's why most of the time they end up getting retained. It's a weird system, and again, it really protects who is already in there, whether they be Republican or Democrat. And that's one other thing. When you're up for retention, the party you originally ran on, is no longer listed. Mm-hmm. So you become this apolitical judge when you're on there for retention, whereas when you actually run in the first place, you pick a party. It's a weird way we do it here in Pennsylvania.
And in this race in particular, misinformation was spread about these justices. Probably everyone in Pennsylvania got those mailers that said certain things about the justices' records and history, some of which were completely inaccurate. So 2025 is such an off-books year of, we don't have a manual for this. We don't know how things are going to turn out. This is uncharted territory, and America is built for that, to allow for that. But it can certainly be nerve-wracking and destabilizing. And it's worth mentioning the importance of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, because Pennsylvania is a swing state. Every year that there is a presidential election, there are a lot of eyes on Pennsylvania. And increasingly over the last few years, there are lawsuits in pretty much every major national election in Pennsylvania, or challenges or vote recounts or whatever. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ends up playing a really important role sometimes to hold the line of democracy and protect the voters' interests and uphold the constitutionality of what goes on. And so it is not a reach to say the Pennsylvania Supreme Court could determine the next U.S. presidential election. It could shake out to a ruling by them, just as happened in the Florida Supreme Court in Bush v. Gore.
Well, God help us if we get into another Bush v. Gore type situation. But, you know, I agree. I mean, the state Supreme Courts in this era taking on much more importance, and people are paying more attention, I think, particularly in, you know, states like Wisconsin and North Carolina, where shifts in the makeup of the state's highest court have directly resulted in new legislative maps. In the case of North Carolina, that highly favored Republicans. In the case of Wisconsin, that gave Democrats a fighting chance. Now, and I'm not saying that because I'm biased one way or another. Them's simply the facts.
And we're seeing that in Texas and California now, right? They're also paying attention to the redistricting.
Oh, certainly. Now, in the case of Texas, there is no resistance to them doing that whatsoever. They've got their Supreme Court is comprised of rock-ribbed conservatives from front to back, whereas California, they had to go and have the voters say it was okay because of the law that they've passed. They can only redistrict. There's certain procedures they have to follow in California, whereas those Texans, they can just, as long as the legislature passes it and the governor's cool with it, the Supreme Court's going to bless it down there. You know, they've just got that thing stacked. You know, again, in Wisconsin, the situation's a little more, it's kind of like here in Pennsylvania, where the court was like, hey, okay, here's a map that's fair. It doesn't really help one party out in big ways, one way or another. And that's kind of what happened in Wisconsin. Whereas North Carolina, those folks down there, the court flipped and they were like, here is our hyper gerrymandered map. And the court was like, that looks great to us. So
this is making me think of the Voting Rights Act, which I will not dive down too deep a rabbit hole because it could be its own podcast episode. But there was a case a few years ago in the U.S. Supreme Court called Shelby County, where they basically undid the protections of the Voting Rights Act after Obama was elected. And those were race-based protections. And Justice Ginsburg wrote a scathing dissent about undoing those protections because the idea that one or two elections are an indicator that we no longer need these very hard-fought protections was something that she rejected and disagreed with. So the specifics might be novel in 2025, but the themes aren't. Yeah. And our system is built to adjust to these things. And voter turnout really matters in these areas. It even affects the budget. We look at who showed up where and when and in what quantity, and then you also will mix that with the census to determine the district drawing, and it's all simple yet complex.
Oh yeah, indeed. You know, we'll see how this shakes out for future races. I know there's been some people who said they're afraid that how intense this Pennsylvania Supreme Court race will result in more partisan Supreme Court races in Pennsylvania in the future, whereas previously they had been fairly sleepy affairs. I personally wonder if the nature of the retention will insulate Pennsylvania from that. It might be weird, but again, because it results in such strong incumbent protection, you got to wonder if big donors are going to be like, it's a waste of money because it's such an uphill fight. It's not even just a challenger versus an incumbent. It's this weird system that seems to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to overcome. So you got to wonder if that might keep Pennsylvania free of that. I don't know.
Yeah,
time will tell.
Another area voter turnout matters, not just in the allocation of the budget, but also the investment of money into future races.
Yeah. And I think, as far as budget stuff goes, I think generally speaking, the party in charge gets blamed for it, rightfully or wrongfully. It's just like the manager in a sports team. Sometimes if the team stinks and you're losing, the manager is going to get sacked. It might not have anything to do with the manager. Maybe the players just stink. But sometimes they're the guy that gets the blame. And, the management wants to make a change, look like they're doing something, and then so the manager gets sacked.
Well, and that's one of the theories about why Pennsylvania doesn't have a budget yet, right? Because in one of the theories is the Republicans are holding it back in order to jeopardize Shapiro's reelection campaign in advance of him potentially running for president after that.
I think maybe initially when there was the transportation SEPTA back and forth thing during the budget conversation, Democrats might have had the upper hand, but I think that started to shift because Governor Shapiro's thing is get shit done, GSD. And if you don't have a budget for your state, doesn't look like you're getting stuff done.
Yep. And no legislation is moving.
Whether that's his fault or not, I mean, I personally think Republicans have been really the only thing that they'll say yes to is the things that they have proposed, which to me is not a negotiation. But regardless of that, the perception on the outside for people that are not paying super close attention to Harrisburg is that the party in charge isn't making stuff happen. And similarly, the flip side in D.C., where you've got Republicans in charge of Congress, I think they're probably receiving a good deal of the blame for the government shutdown that's happened at the federal level. And I think that probably resulted in helping Democrats in this election. But I wonder if with or without the shutdown, if we probably would have seen similarly high turnout.
Now, Sean, we're a political nonprofit, right? We endorsed some candidates. How did our endorsed candidates do?
We went 7 for 7 in our endorsements.
Woo! What's up, Clean Air Action candidates?
We really drilled down across the state of Pennsylvania to find folks who were good on environmental issues, on the issues we focus most on in our work at Clean Air Action. And just to drop some names of some particular folks, you got Tara Zirinsky, who ran for the Northampton executives race. You've got Nadeem Qayyum, who ran for Northampton commissioner. Michelle Nakarati Chapkiss and Alex Rose both ran for Allegheny County Council. And we had Joe Kahn, of course, in Bucks County. And so, we really thought these folks were great because they had that environmental issues and public health issues embedded as part of their platform, and not really because there was a lot of obvious political benefit. That tends to be the case with environmental stuff. It's not a bread and butter finances kind of thing where there's easy and obvious political upside. A lot of this stuff is nuanced, takes a lot of time to implement, takes a lot of time to bring to fruition.
And can be politically unpopular, as we talked about in our last episode.
Absolutely. And so all of these guys put that out there because they know it's the right thing to do, and they know it's good for people in the long run. And the last thing I'll say about that is all of these folks believe what we believe, that we can have great public health, we can have a healthy, thriving environment, and we can have a magnificent economy, one that works really great for everybody. We can have all of those things at the same time. We don't have to choose between jobs and whether or not our air and our water are dirty. We can have clean air, clean water, and great jobs.
Yeah, we can. And a thriving economy. I'll peach ring to that.
Peach ring to that.
You want a peach ring? Cheers?
Sure. That's slipping away. It's slipping away from me.
Unlike the thriving election cycles and the voter turnout and the people power as demonstrated at the polls.
For now. At least as far as 2025 went.
Yeah, we'll see what 2026 brings.
So, with that, was it a blue wave?
I'm going to stick with it's a sign that 2026 might be. And there were unexpected seats that flipped red to blue. But I don't know what my hesitation is to call it a blue wave. Maybe part of it is that I don't love some of the political media cycles that we see. So I'm going to hold back a little bit and say it was a blue swell, maybe, but not a whole wave.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. when
Maybe because you used the phrase blue swell last week, I actually took it from you.
That's why I like it so much, because it's my idea. I think it's hard to claim a wave when you don't really have a national election, because when I think it's true. It's like, well, we saw blue floods all over the place, and
Blue leaks.
Blue trickles. Yeah, and I think I totally agree that if you are Democrats, you're thinking, well, we might not be shoo-ins in 2026. There are multiple political lifetimes between now and the 2026 midterms. However, if you're Democrats, you're thinking we've got about as good a foundation for going into 2026 based on these results that we could possibly have. That is definitely true. Again, what happens between now and next November remains to be seen. But Democrats certainly
need a lot of peach rings.
A lot of peach rings. Democrats certainly have the momentum at the moment. We can talk in future episodes about what the lay of the land is going to look like as far as 2026 midterms go, and what both parties will have to overcome for victory. But that's for next time.
That's for next time. And that's part of my hesitation in declaring blue wave, because I hate it when, especially in politics, people declare victory prematurely. I'm currently thinking of the "We did it" banner behind President Bush, and yay, Brownie, and
mission accomplished,
mission accomplished. I want to avoid that energy. So let's see what 2026 brings.
Yeah. I think Virginia had its own blue wave, but I think we'll have to wait for 2026 to see truly if the swell leads to a tide.
The trickle leads to a full tsunami, monsoon. I don't
know. Some sort of deluge.
Yes. A blue deluge.
Water, precipitation. The whole thing.
We shall see. Well, a big thank you to Clean Air Action's incredible team who helps us get this podcast together and out to the listeners. And to our listeners, thanks for listening to Cleaning Up Dirty. To help us clean up dirty, follow us at Clean Air Action everywhere on social media, and subscribe to Cleaning Up Dirty wherever you stream podcasts.